Hello, everyone. Forest Focus after a busy weekend for Nottingham Forest on the transfer front as they close in on not one, not two, but three Brazilian players. Will there be another Machacano, Manini and Petracchi, or will there be something exciting? Joining me to discuss all that and the future of Morgan Gibbs-White and a little bit more, first of all, is Michael Temple. Temps, good morning. How are you?
Good, mate. How many Brazilians are you allowed in your side? This is turning into my Football Manager Forest team, which won the European Cup 5 times in a row between 2030 and 2035. I don't think we'll quite get there. But the second coming of Bebeto on that game must have scored 45 a year for me.
Some spectacular regens by that time. Lovely stuff. Lovely stuff. Pete Blackburn, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Not bad at all.
I think I might have aged us all there with the reference to the Plat's three Italians. Who were they were the Portuguese three, weren't they? Carvalho. Who were the other two?
Goncalves and Diaz.
Goncalves. That was it. Yeah. Well, hopefully they're not like them. They sound quite interesting.
The Italian trio were great. I remember being at school at the time, and we were all fighting to be Gianluca Petracchi in the playground. And I don't think that fight lasted for very long. But when he signed, we were certainly absolutely buzzing.
Yeah, I remember. Did he play like Port Vale thing? I thought this could probably, not in his element. This guy, I remember that. So yeah, interesting.
This reminded me of Gil Diaz coming on against Norwich.
Norwich.
We can't talk about that.
No,
in a different place, lads. In a different place.
I'm going to say this is not the footing start off this podcast when we're talking about players signing. One of them who's Brazil's pretty current number 9 in Igor Jesus. So we'll talk about those three. Then we'll talk about Morgan Gibbs-White a bit and a couple of the transfer lines. Let's start then with we'll start with the striker. 3 players, all from Botafogo: Igor Jesus, Cuiabano, and Jair Cunha. Igor Jesus is the striker. He's 24 years old. He's got 4 Brazil caps, including scoring on his debut. The reason we were late starting, by the way, is I had all this in my notes and it was all lost. So I'm doing this off the top of my head now. He had 4 years in the UAE and then came back to sign for Botafogo on a free. 19 games later, he's in the Brazil squad and leading the line for them. So there's obviously something there. So we'll play a little clip on each of the 3 players that I've mentioned with Pedro from Glorious Botafogo, and then I'll pick the brains of these lads and see what they make of it all. So here's a little clip from Pedro on Igor Jesus. There's a full scouting report in another video, and I'll drop the link for that in the description if you want to check it out. It's well worth it. But here's Pedro on Igor.
Inside the box, he has great aerial presence. He can beat most defenders in the air and score goals. He scored a lot of headers, not only for Botafogo, but for the national team. But like I said earlier, he also is kind of like your false 9. He's kind of a mix of a target man and a false 9, where he can come out of the box, receive to do a 1-2, or to even send a through ball for a teammate that's making a dummy run and put them right in front of the goal. So Igor is really a complete striker that is a young striker. He's 23 years old, 24 years old. And he, I think, is not yet in his prime. I don't think Igor Jesus is in his prime yet, especially physically speaking. I don't think he's in his prime. A move to the Premier League would be so good for Igor. Talking about the player, because in my opinion, I'd love for him to stay at Botafogo. He, in just less than a year, he created such a strong identity with the supporters.
There you go. Lovely stuff. Tommy's asking, how do I lose my notes? Going inside how this all works. There's a section on StreamYard, Tommy, and it's supposed to save it all and it deletes it all. I'm not that incompetent, despite what people might think. Right. Thanks, Pete. Right. So on him, I'll start with Pete, who's going to tell me he can't say anything because he hasn't seen him play enough. His goal record isn't amazing. 7 goals in 23 games this season. So there's obviously some areas of his game that will need work on. He doesn't sound a natural goal scorer, but he's got a lot of attributes. And also 17 million quid doesn't get you a lot of money in the English market, but you maybe get a lot more in the Brazilian market. So any general thoughts on Igor Jesus and this deal?
Well, we know it's pre-season, right? Because last season is properly in the rearview mirror now. We had all these agendas that you wrote for us about all the things we're going to talk about on the podcast, and had lots of interesting views, or I thought they were interesting. I actually saw a question and thought, I've got something to say about that. And now I've got a long list of stuff from you, and the answer to every single point on it is I don't know. But I'm going to steal some other people's knowledge here, and I'll credit it. I mean, the three signings, I think, all look. I think they're all signings that we can, from what we can sort of see, we can probably be cautiously optimistic about. But the reality is that very few of us have got enough knowledge or have seen enough to go much more in depth than that. There are a few of the sort of local analysts and sort of people like that have done some really interesting bits and bobs on Twitter and other social media in recent days about looking into the numbers and some of the clips about these players. And I've had a good look at what everyone's been saying. I mean, as normal with players from like the South American market in particular, you do get a lot of hype, I guess, particularly from local reporters or people who support the clubs and such like. So it's sometimes a bit hard to know. But Jesus is an interesting one. I think Chris Kearney, who's behind Forest Analytics, has done a really interesting sort of thread on him this morning. He looks like someone who's got some real strengths, particularly, I think you mentioned he looks like a real aerial threat, someone who can link the play. And I think those are attributes that are clearly useful for us because we've seen Chris Wood have a lot of success in both those areas, particularly in heading. And also, if we're going to keep Elanga and perhaps add more wide options, I know you spoke to John Percy, and he was suggesting that a winger or two is high at Forest's agenda, then someone who can drop deep and play those passes in behind for players like Elanga could be a really useful option for us. I think you said he's not wildly prolific right now, and you perhaps would hope for a little bit more at his age. But the truth is we're shopping in a market, as we have done in recent windows, where we're trying to find a bit of an edge, aren't we? And finding someone who we think has got some of the raw materials and we might be able to bring him here and build on those things is probably where we're at right now, because you're not going to get someone that you can be really confident about for 15-20 million pounds. You're going to get them for 50 or 60, if not more. So yeah, I think there's plenty to like about it. I also think, I'm not sure it's been talked about an awful lot, but Chris posted some clips of his work on the pitch, and he does look like he can get up to pace pretty quickly and hold that pace as well, which I think would be nice for us up top, because that's what clearly not an attribute that Chris Wood has, while he has an awful lot of other attributes. So hopefully he's someone that would be able to bring some similar skills to Chris Wood, but also challenge him and some alternative skills, because we just lacked so much off the bench, haven't we? And having some of those different attributes could be pretty useful for us.
Yeah, he does sound similar to Wood in the sense he's physical, he's strong, he can hold the ball up. But also a comment here from Will about being like Firmino. A couple of articles I read, and Pedro said that he'll drop deep and link the play and look for runners in behind, which suggests he'll be a different option, Temps, and maybe help us play a different way, maybe not from the start, but in periods of games as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can compare him to Chris Wood and Firmino, but from what I've seen, he'd work really well as a leading the line in our 4-5-1, 4-3-3. Call it what you will. Echo what's been said about he looks for work, comes deep, likes to get on the ball, very unselfish. He'll play a wall pass back into midfield. He'll turn and run. He'll bring wide players into play. Quite unselfish in the middle third. He scored goals where he's played, but he's played in the UAE and Brazil. I think if you look at the sole goal he's got for Brazil, which is a bit Chris Wood-esque, kind of makes the near post run, glancing header to the back stick, and it seems a really tidy finish, comfortable in that kind of company with those creative players around him. But I think most importantly, these deals look like good value deals, and I don't think there's too much risk attached with putting someone out of Brazil. And they've got the cap, they've got this goal scoring record behind them, and they're at an age where they're only going to have value added to them by being in and around the Premier League and by being in and around European competition, as he will be at Forest. So sound business. Far too early to tell if he's a 5-goal a season man or a 25-goal a season man. But another example of a well-researched player, an age profile that means he's not going to be lumbered as a wage sack that we can't offload should we need to. And the possibility too, of course, that this isn't necessarily a solution for now. It's a player that we're going to trade, potentially loan, chuck it with Olympiacos, whatever might happen. But yeah, big range of outcomes for this one, and need to see far more of him before we make a firm judgment.
Yeah, we'll come to potential loans and Olympiacos as well. Just a little bit more on him. As Temp said, and reading up on him, he will work for the team. He's quite selfless. He'll do the other side of the game as well, which makes me think he would fit in very well. Probably his weakness is that kind of Chris Wood area of finishing and being a high chance converter. He's 24, Pete, which partly makes you think it's now or never for him as well, in terms of this thing, if players get past 24 or even 22, 23 in South America, then Europe might not be for them. And we've seen this with Sosa. It could, you're taking a gamble, and I guess you're taking a calculated gamble with a relatively low fee these days.
Yeah, I think that's largely true. I think this is probably the move, should it happen, as it seems like it is going to, that will define whether he can be a success in Europe and outside of Brazil. I think he has played abroad already, hasn't he? But obviously not in Europe. I think the key to it really as well is just having a bit of patience with it, and hopefully what we've got now is the comfort of having had a good season and looking upwards rather than looking downwards too much. That when we bring players like him in, he's not someone who's going to have to go straight into the 11 and it be demanded that he score goals. Otherwise, we're at serious risk of relegation. Hopefully, that's where we're going to be at as a club. We'll be a football club that can bring people in and put good support around people and give them time and space to adapt. Because we know it's difficult. I mean, some players like Murillo can apparently just rock up, and I guess maybe the fearlessness of youth in his case, perhaps, or just the fact that he's an absolute freak of nature, given how physically and technically adept he is. Some players can do that, but for others it takes a bit longer. I think Danilo's needed a bit more time to settle, and I think that would be the case for most footballers. So hopefully that's where we are with it. The price point is exactly as you say. I think it's the market that I constantly say that we should be operating in. So I'm certainly going to support Forest for doing that. What we have to do is we have to do our work as best as we can, as diligently as we can, get as much information about these players, about their abilities, about their weaknesses, about their backgrounds, all that sort of stuff. Because you can't take risk out of recruitment. There's always going to be risk there. But we try and mitigate that by having as much information as we can, as much eyes on them as possible, eyes on the data, all that sort of stuff. And hope that we can bring them here and turn them into players who can stay with us for a long time, develop, get better, become worth more money and better themselves elsewhere, if that's how it plays out. It's absolutely where we need to be. I'm really pleased to see Forest continuing to work in this sort of market. It's far more reassuring for me, even though I know very little about these players and they're all gambles, as recruitment generally is. But it's far more reassuring for me that we're doing this rather than signing players in their late 20s or early 30s that may have already done it in England, but pose a big risk because the best might well be behind them. We're never going to get the same fee for them again. We're not going to be able to continue building the club by selling them. And those deals are risks for other reasons. And we've seen so much of that at Forest with players that we've just not been able to move on and all sorts of things like that. So I think it's hugely positive. I'm optimistic about it. We just have to see how they play out and try and give them a bit of patience.
It's supposed to be a £70 million fee, and they'll go through after the Club World Cup. So we'll might have some interest in actually watching that now. One other thing, just on him quickly, Temps. There's lots of reports in Brazil that he wasn't overly keen initially to join, and that either the club or his agent have convinced him either he wanted to stay until the end of the Brazilian season, or he just actually wanted to stay initially. He's obviously on board with the move now, by all accounts. Does that worry you at all, or is this the kind of thing that actually might happen quite a lot and we just don't know about it, and players need a nudge to make a big move like this?
I think any Brazilian footballer knows that he needs to leave the homeland to fulfill his potential, and certainly to fulfill his earning potential. And that's what clubs like Botafogo and Santos do, right? They develop players. They have an incredible heritage and production line of talented young footballers and relatively little competition from other sports. So it's no surprise that footballers are one of Brazil's biggest exports. But no, I'm not surprised by that. And you don't know where that line's come from. Of course, he has to say to local media that he's committed to Botafogo and he's there until he hears otherwise. I think the language barrier in some of the translated reports that we see can be a factor as well. But no, I don't read anything into that. He's a professional footballer, and as soon as he puts a red kit on, he'll do his best to perform for our team.
We'll talk Cuiabano in 1 minute. Actually, we'll talk Cuiabano in 52 seconds. We'll just take a quick word or ad for the Trent navigation.
Hey up me duckies, a quick rundown of match days at the Big Shed. We're open from 10, serving full English breakfast, teas, coffees, and believe it or not, beers. Father's Footy Quiz is followed by the lunchtime kickoffs, and the outdoor kitchen is fired up from midday, serving sourdough pizzas, burgers, hot dogs, pies, and sausage rolls. Lovely. Pints start at £4. We have a great selection of cask ales and lagers to lubricate the vocal cords for a bit of a sing-song before the game. After the match, we've got some great DJs and live bands booked. So get your send down to the Trent Nav. Win or lose, we're having a booze. And if we draw, we'll have some more.
I know there's no games for ages, but I thought I'd play that one to remind us of what you can get and what we're missing as well. Are you missing it? Are you missing it, or are you enjoying the break?
Yeah, I'm missing it. I'd watch football every Saturdays for me. Of football, right? Maybe I shouldn't say that. Working in cricket when I'm trying to get a crowd to Trent Bridge next Saturday. But yeah, I definitely think something's missing from the weekend when there's not a program on a Saturday afternoon in particular.
Lovely, Pete.
Yeah, particularly missing that feeling that we had for so much of the season where we were chasing the dream. I mean, that was just properly magical, wasn't it? Not so much missing the sinking feeling that we didn't quite get what we wanted in the end, but yeah, I think Thames is right. What is Saturday without football?
Certainly. Not long till friendlies anyway. They'll be around before we know it. I think fixtures are out in like 3 weeks as well or something. So it'll soon come around. Lots of transfer stuff, obviously. So move on to Cuiabano. He 22-year-old left back, can also play left wing back, left wing, very attacking. Looks okay defensively. The old YouTube highlights include a lot of slide tackles, which look good, but you kind of think maybe do a few less of those. But sounds interesting. The interesting thing about him was he looked like he was close to joining Brighton, and we know their recruitment model is very good. Less appealing was that Man United were keen, also Spurs, Bournemouth, also linked clubs in Turkey and Europe. So quite a lot to like there. He's played quite a lot of games for Botafogo as well. I'll play another clip from Pedro, and then we'll do a similar sort of chat. But here's a little bit on Cuiabano.
And this year, Cuiabano is having the best start of his career. No, it's no surprise that he's attracting the attention from clubs not only in the Premier League but also in Serie A, just like Igor Jesus with Roma. Now, Cuiabano's kind of like, he's not a complete defensive fullback, but he is very great going forward. So much so that now Alex Telles, I don't know if you guys remember from Man United and Sevilla, Davies is the starting left back, and Cuiabano has now taken the left mid, left wing. He's like an attacking wing back at Botafogo. So he comes back to defend. Him and Telles will every now and then switch. When one goes forward, the other one stays back. But for the most part, Cuiabano is making those forward runs. Our manager, Renato Paiva, really likes to use the fullbacks as attacking wing backs.
Good stuff from Pedro from Glorious Botafogo. Like I say, check out the whole video. It's well worth it. We'll take a quick tangent and then we'll actually talk about him. Steve, how much temps is it the first T20 Saturday night coming up?
Steve knows it's the second one. We absolutely pasted Birmingham on Friday night. We're going again this Saturday. That's my promo done.
Lovely stuff. I teed that up for you. Pat makes a good point. Saturday football won't really be a thing if we go deep in the Conference League. We're going to be playing a lot of Thursday, Sunday. So Sunday is the new Saturday.
I'll
right.
still be on the sofa watching soccer Saturday. Don't worry about
that. So temps, Cuiabano, very attacking, very exciting, I guess. Is the appealing thing, again, we don't know huge amounts about him, but Brighton were very close to signing him. And, you know, if Brighton think he's decent, he probably is.
First of all, despite losing notes, I love the structure of this podcast. So you asked me and Pete to guess about a few Brazilian lads we've never seen, and then have a genuine expert give us 2 minutes of quality. I really like the structure. What I'll say about both of these boys, I've seen the clips, they're going to get a lot of yellow cards in the Premier League. And from what I can see of the Brazilian top tier, it is a case at times of flair players getting absolutely hacked to death by really physical defenders. having seen 3 minutes of both the highlights, go to ground far too often, not afraid to hit hard in their own third, certainly take a lot of defensive risk. And I think the manner in which those games are refereed allows them to get away with it. They celebrate flair players in Brazil. Having loaded their teams with them, there's always going to be a few bruises on the opposition looking to get in with a bit of a hack. So that needs to be honed. I think, having said that, Murillo is a great example of channeled aggression, controlled aggression. Didn't see too much of him before he came to Forest, but you couldn't ever accuse him of being reckless. His interceptions, his press, his jockey is very well controlled, and he certainly hasn't been a yellow card machine. So that might just be a case of needing to adapt the horse for the course if they do come to the UK. I like what he said about his attacking intent. I think that's really important to the manner in which Forest play, whether we're playing with a back four or the wing backs. We do expect Nico and Ola to bomb on. I think this player profiles more closely to those guys than any fullbacks we've had at Forest in recent time, serving as their understudies. And he looks very comfortable on the ball, which I think is a hallmark of all of these Brazilian players, irrespective of where they play. They're prepared to have the ball at their feet. They've got a range of passing, and that they're not averse to trying to take a man on. So again, another example of a player with the kind of profile that we want. Interesting to see if he can adapt his game to the Premier League. And with a few tweaks, the manner in which he implements his game, I think he's got all the assets to succeed. Is he too young to break into our side at 22? I don't think he'll trouble Rayan or Nico Williams for a starting place, but he seems to be a player that would serve as effective backup. And that means in this season, with these Europa Conference games, the potential to start 10, 15 times. So I can see why this kind of move would appeal.
Do please remember to like and subscribe. That would be very good. 325 people with us, which is lovely for 10 a.m. on a Monday morning. And no, Jackie, I don't mind you saying what you said all about Steve's appearance on Talking Reds. I'll check it out myself. An interesting on him, Pete, as well. Say he's playing higher, he's versatile. That's probably going to be useful if, assuming he's with us next season in our squad. In the Conference League, lots of games on multiple fronts. Maybe Sosa's going, which we'll come on to. We're probably going to need a player who can play a few positions, and it sounds like he can definitely do that.
Yeah, I think I've banged on about it on here before that versatility is going to be really key to us. I think, I guess you traditionally think about that in areas like across the front line, where you find a lot of players who can play out wide and play up top, and that can be really useful. But I think versatility for Cuiabano is something that could be a real benefit to us. Like, I think because we can't do anything hugely detailed on these players, I think it's worth just looking at the potential positives they bring. And versatility is a massive one. We obviously lack wingers who can come on and be direct and offer alternatives to our first choice wingers. So he's somebody who can offer that potentially off the bench. He's also somebody who can offer us clearly a naturally left-footed option, either at left back or at left wing back, which means system change is also easier to implement, whether you want to bring wing backs on. I think the profile is interesting and feels good to me, because in Nico and Olareino, I think we've got fullbacks who are very, very good in one-on-one defensive situations. Aina's really good at drifting inside as well, and he's really good with the ball in tight situations. He links play really nicely. I don't think either of them you would describe as massively direct. I mean, this guy looks like someone who will get the ball and will run at defenders from deeper positions and bring a bit more of that sort of pace and power as well, which I think is probably an area that we haven't got an awful lot of in those sort of wide fullback positions. So, I mean, it feels to me like if he brings you versatility, he brings you another option for system change. I mean, just having a left-footed option in that position clearly makes a difference and can have an impact on what the opposition are able to do and all that sort of stuff. It feels to me like a bit of a potential no-brainer, particularly, I mean, you listed all those clubs that were linked. I guess it sounds like maybe he's got representatives who are quite active. But you say those magic words to me, Brighton are interested, Brighton submitted a bid. I'm on board.
I think so. Yeah, Michelle says, can't tackles be coached out? I think they can. I'm sure they can. He's 22. Another decent point that Michelle makes, a good point. The volume of Brazilian players and Portuguese speakers and a Portuguese speaking manager, Thames, is probably useful in terms of settling in as well, although you would need to be patient with them, of course. But it is a benefit to have that many Portuguese speakers in the group.
Of course it is. You feel so much more comfortable, don't you, when you're surrounded by people that share your culture and your language. I think an important point to make, having been around sports teams all of my working life, you can have good cliques and bad cliques in any kind of squad setup. I think Forest is an example of having really good cliques. There's clearly a Portuguese speaking element. There's the crowd around Olarena. You see Woody, Nico, Morgan Gibbs-White together in Bridgeford all the time, having coffees or whatever. So I think there are these pockets of friendship groups, but also a team togetherness and camaraderie and a spirit that's come about achieving together and winning together and taking this team from where they are to where they are, where they were to where they are now. I think that's a really, really positive thing. And I can see why it's that bit easier for us to add to that group of Brazilians in this case, having already having a core on board.
Let's talk Jair Cunha then. He's the third of the trio, all from Botafogo, of course. 20-year-old central defender, played 32 games now, I think, in his senior career. Started off with Santos, joined Botafogo for about 5 million in February. And it sounded like he was supposed to join Lyon, who are owned by John Textor, who owns Botafogo, who owns Lyon. And obviously there's a Lyon connection with us, with Niakate and Mangala. So it's interesting whatever's happening there. It seems like we're benefiting again because he's not joining Lyon. And he does sound very exciting. A few people seem the highest on this player of the three, including Nathan Joyce, who's on tomorrow from Copper Club. He should give us his insight on him. But yeah, it sounds really exciting, this one, even if he's pretty raw. So here's Pedro from Glorious Botafogo again with this one's just a 30-second insight on him, really bigging him up.
And he's a very promising player. Jair is the kind of player that here in a few years, even if it doesn't transfer to Forest, if he stays at Botafogo, you can imagine clubs that finish top 5 in every single European league to be after this guy. He is going to be doing great things, and I think he's the future of Brazil's defense and the national team. I really do think that.
No reported fee for him that I've seen. The Cuiabano one's about 10 million. So 10 million plus 17 million plus, I don't know, say 15 million or whatever for Jair Cunha is a total of around 40 million for the three. Interesting words there, Pete, obviously, on Jair Cunha, but quite a few people sound really excited by him. We can't assume another Murillo because Murillo's a freak, I would say, and how quickly he's adapted and progressed. But I don't know. It does sound interesting, doesn't it?
It could be an easy one for us to get carried away with here because the sort of the people who write about Brazilian football and who do scouting reports and all that sort of stuff seem to be hyping him up pretty massively. And the way they're talking makes him sound like he'll make Murillo look like he's nothing. So I mean that would be some achievement. I think he's the hardest one for us to have much to say about because he's played very little football at the highest level in Brazil, and so the pool of sort of data and knowledge for us to use is pretty small, really. I think one of the things that might be quite exciting about him, it might sound a bit odd, is that he's had a serious injury. I think it sounds like he had an ACL injury. And when you go back in 2023, there was an awful lot of talk about what this guy was going to be. I guess before that happened. And people talking him up as a real potential sort of complete defender, future of the national team, all that sort of stuff. Obviously, pinch of salt or whatever, but he is clearly someone who was getting people very, very excited. No doubt the injury will have put him back a little bit and has quietened things down in terms of the talk about his imminent trajectory being massive. So it might be that that's one of those scenarios where Forest have got a little bit of an edge and can take the gamble because that might put clubs off. It might be that people want a bit of time to see him playing like with Murillo, playing 10 or 12 games or whatever, it's a pretty small sample size to take the leap. And perhaps that's where we're at again. Again, like I say, it's so hard to have a huge opinion. But I mean, if what the sort of scouts and people who watch Brazilian football are saying is even sort of a quarter true, then it sounds like a player of great potential, as someone who can do a bit of everything. Has got a massive frame to grow into, and could potentially be a real addition for us.
Temps commented on slightly rash judgment and youthful defending, and he did get sent off the other day. And Pedro did talk about he'll take a risk and things like that, and put himself about. So it's kind of raw materials and tons of potential, but there's the potential that is particularly interesting. And Forest might be stealing a march on some talent that needs polishing up, I guess. Temps.
Aggression is an interesting thing, isn't it? And you don't want a reckless defender, because you need to finish games with 11 men in the Premier League, and you don't want your best player suspended. But I think what you're seeing from looking at his clips is, if he gets a chance to take man and ball, he's doing it. He wants strikers to know that they're in a game with him, and he's hard. And I like that from players on my team. I'd put Milenkovic in that bracket, absolutely. Firm but fair. If he gets a chance to do both in illegal ways, he's going to do it. He's going to clatter man and ball. He's not going in studs up, but he's finding a way to show aggression. And that's where these younger players need to get to. It's brutal, isn't it, that these Brazilian fans, when they see anybody emerge, if they've played 10 games, 20 games or 30 games, and the European leagues decide that they've got the potential to hold their own, they're whipped out at a moment's notice and probably never seen again in the homeland until they do a victory lap when they're 35, 36. I think it's far too early to get excited about him as a potential Brazil cap. I think he's got a lot to do to get to that point, and he's got Murillo in his way, amongst others. But another player at the right age, at a price to which we could add a lot of value if he was to make appearances and do well. And as per Murillo, I think he's another player that's very, very comfortable on the ball and can look to dribble and distribute, rather than just lay it off to the fullback. And I think that's an important part of the centre-half weaponry in the Premier League that we find ourselves in today.
Yeah, very exciting, interesting attempt reference, the clips, the YouTube clips that can be very deceiving. But he does kind of play in a Milenkovic style, but he can ping a pass and he looks decent on the ball. So lots to like there. Just picking up on a few points in the round of all three, Pete, there is the potential that at least one might go out on loan. And I guess probably Cunha might be the one. I don't know if someone goes to Olympiacos, something like that. I don't. I wouldn't like that, but maybe if a season in Greece might benefit him. I don't know about doing it with Igor Jesus at his age, but in principle, would you mind if any of them went out on loan, or is that something that we can't really talk about at this stage because it's in the distance?
Well, as a blanket rule, I don't like the plan that we sign young talented players and they just go to Olympiacos, and that's a sort of straightforward move. I think what you have to be doing in modern football is looking for the best solution for every player, and just going immediately sending them to Olympiacos in Greek football isn't necessarily the right move for lots of footballers. So I think, as long as there are no issues around PSR and however these arrangements are made, it's all sort of covered off, then it doesn't need to be a monumental issue, because we don't want to see Forest signing players that then ultimately cost us that balance sheet, even though they're not appearing for us. But I prefer to see us have like a real plan for all of our young talented footballers, where each of them has a sort of a bespoke idea of what the right division, what the right country, what the right level is, the style of football in the particular team, the manager, all that sort of stuff. I'm not convinced that the Greek league is necessarily going to be the best place for most young talented footballers that we want to bring onto a level where they can play in the Premier League. It doesn't seem like the obvious choice to me. Perhaps it is for some, and perhaps for some who just need to adapt to European football, maybe maybe it is an option, but for me it wouldn't be the obvious choice for most footballers, I don't think.
Russell makes a point here as well. We do have a lot of centre backs on the books. We're going to be doing some. There's going to be some movement here, I think, this summer. Murillo Milenkovic, Jair possibly, Morato, Tyler Binden, Abba, Omobamidele, David Carmo, as he says in his later comment, who's on loan at Olympiacos, and John Percy said Willie Bolly might stay as well in sort of a mentor role. So there's got to be some movement there, I'd imagine, if he signs. Last one on these this trio, Temps. Firstly, I think if we do it, it's a big positive to get business done early before pre-season. And secondly, I assume this is the influence of Edu, who I don't think officially works for us yet, but he quite clearly seems like he's going to. So it seems like that relationship might be bearing fruit already.
Yeah, we spoke about it before, haven't we, about having an advantage in a market that others have less confidence in. And having Edu in the Marinakis group, we're certainly going to have our hands in Brazil. And I think it's proved to be a fruitful market. There's no way in which we could compete with those teams around us, and even the bigger clubs that have fallen down the league a little bit. Let's talk about Man United. Let's talk about Spurs. They're going to be able to extract talent that's impressed in the top 5 European leagues and pay the fees required to get them out of there. We can't do that. I think we've all educated ourselves enough in PSR and the manner in which we've been able to arrive at being a competitive force in the Premier League by not breaking the bank to go to Italy, Spain, rival English clubs and pull out players at market rate. We have to look elsewhere. We have to be better than others at doing that. And I think scouting in Brazil, South America, more obscure corners of Europe is the way that we're going to continue to do that.
Right, we really should move on. The clock's ticking, and I think Temps has got to go in 10 minutes. So Pete could be sweeping up quite a few things here before we go. We'll talk about
lots of I don't knows incoming, guys.
Well, we're going to move on to Morgan Gibbs-White, but before that, a very quick word for Global Telemetrics. This is a really short video, but as ever, the link will be in the description for what they do.
Here we are in the ringing shop now. So. Busted in action, disrupting criminality, together we can, West Midlands Police.
A very short video. That was inside a chop shop for those of you who are listening, not watching. So some stolen vehicles tracked down there with the support of the police, obviously, through Global Telemetrics vehicle trackers. Right, check that out. Links in the description as usual. Morgan Gibbs-White. Let's talk about him. All the talk of Manchester City looking to sign him, and I think they still are. Fabrizio Romano said they're still interested, but the price is pretty high at the moment. Interestingly, City looking at signing Rayan Cherki, if I'm saying that right, from Lyon for about 34 million, and Tijjani Reijnders from AC Milan. Two central midfielders, sort of in the bracket of Gibbs-White, or certainly attacking, strengthening their midfield options. I suppose the question is, Pete, where does that leave Forest? Because we've discussed that maybe it's a good time to sell him. How would you feel if Morgan did stay? And again, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but say Morgan's in our squad next season, I assume everyone would be very happy with that. But did you feel like maybe it was actually a good time to sell for the club as a whole?
Yeah, well, both things are true. If Man City are indeed interested, then it's as we think they are, then it's the right time to sell Morgan Gibbs-White, because he's got 2 years left on his deal. We're not going to get a better price for him unless we have a new contract in place. And if he's set his sights on making a move in the relatively nearest future, then we're probably not going to have a new contract agreed. So his value is going to start going down. There's no club, apart from perhaps Chelsea, who will display an interest in one of our footballers and are going to bring a higher price to the table. And that's, this is just the environment we're in right now. We need to be a strong and stable club and do all the things that Temps just talked about, because we need to be able to sell players at their highest. All of those things combine for Forest to then be able to build from a position of strength. So, look, I think it is the perfect time to sell Morgan Gibbs-White if indeed that interest is there. As sad to say as that is, obviously we hope there will be a different sort of footballing world where we didn't have to quite think about those things so much, but it is what it is. So it's the right time to sell if the interest remains there. If he stays, no one's going to be sad about having to watch Morgan Gibbs-White play football for Forest for another season, because he's one of the very best that most of us have ever seen play for the side. Even those who saw the great sides of yesteryear will, I'm sure, count Morgan Gibbs-White as heading up towards those sorts of standards. I guess the issue then would be whether he's necessarily in the sort of the right place mentally. But he seems like a character who's bought into this football club, is really matured, and I'm not. I wouldn't suggest that would be an issue. I mean, I don't think we need to be. I guess we do need to follow the ins and outs of all the transfer sagas, because what else are we going to talk about on the podcast? But I don't think we need to get too high or low about whether it's reported that City are interested in other players. I think what City have got right now, from my perspective as a sort of lay person on the outside, is that they've got a big rebuild on their hands. I don't think that signing Reijnders and Cherki would necessarily complete that whatsoever. Cherki plays a lot of his football out wide. I'm not sure if he would necessarily be someone who's going to play central in a Pep Guardiola team. I'm no expert, but he's a real sort of risk taker, a real creative player. I wouldn't be remotely surprised to see him coming off the right for City if he was to be signed in the immediate future. And I think there's room for more than one central player, because as I see it, City have basically got Rodri, and then outside of that, everybody is aging. Everybody's future is up for that. Is up in question. And I would have thought that they'd want to sign quite a few players in those positions. To be honest, I think it'll be a big summer for them, and I think Gibbs-White will remain on their agenda. I thought.
Yeah. And I don't think we don't have to sell Gibbs-White. It's not like a PSR necessity or anything like that. We might have to sell a few fringe players or this summer, which I think we do anyway. So we could keep Morgan and could keep all our players and do our business very differently. But there are financial realities. If you want to go big in a transfer market, you've got to sell someone at some point, like we sold Brennan. So I suppose the question is, would you sell? There's going to be interest in Murillo, I'm sure, probably Elanga as well, because there has been. Would you sell a different crown jewel to fund a big spending spree, or would you be very happy with the smaller kind of deals that we talked about already? With these Brazilian lads.
I think it's Morgan Gibbs-White that gets sold because that's where the interest is, and that's the highest fee that we can command. And there's a parallel universe in which if we'd have been relegated at any point in the last 3 years and Morgan hadn't led us to where he's led us to now, he'd be leaving for cut price, and we wouldn't be even considering what the replacements would be. So selling him from a position of strength where we don't need to sell. He's done himself proud in the Premier League, earned his England cap. Forest have qualified for European competition. That's why his price is where it is, and that's why clubs like Man City are interested. So market conditions are perfect to sell Morgan Gibbs-White. I like what Pete said. We can't lose. This is going to be a game of brinksmanship to extract maximum cash from Man City. This could well be one that goes to the very, very end of the window. A major transfer of an England cap player at the age he's out with the potential that he has. This deal is not going to get done quickly. My hunch is that Morgan wants it. My hunch is that Man City want it, and that Forest will ultimately be powerless to resist that, and the finance will get there in the end. Classic negotiation incoming, which is going to drag on for weeks. But I can see the sense of it, despite the comments in the on the sidebar here. It is impossible to keep all of your players when a team excels. We would have had a slightly better chance if we'd qualified for the Champions League. But equally, I don't think that would have put Man City off their interest. And I do sadly expect Morgan Gibbs-White to go. And to answer your question, I think and hope that will facilitate keeping hold of the likes of Elanga and Murillo. But you could talk about so many players in this breath. You could see he's interested in Milenkovic, Nico Williams, Ola Reiner, Elliot Anderson, Callum Hudson-Odoi. And for that to end somewhere and to keep the spine of this side together, a high-profile departure will be required, and I suspect it'll be Morgan.
Yeah,
sorry, Matt. I was just going to say, Temps is bang on, because you can't expect a deal like this one to happen quickly. It's enormous money for a player who doesn't have a release clause. It's very easy to go and trigger a £34 million release clause for Rayan Cherki. It's very, very different to try and extricate a England-capped 80 whatever million pound player it is from a Premier League rival. It's just going to be an awful lot more complicated. The other thing I just wanted to add just before I shut up was you mentioned about we probably don't need to do the PSR deal this window. That may be true, totally dependent on what work we want to do. But the reality is that we have to do the PSR deal, one or two of them every 3 or 4 windows, because the club's operating at a loss of tens of millions of pounds a year. And the only reason why we're not under desperate immediate pressure to do that is because we've already done the big deal in selling Brennan Johnson, in selling Niakate, etc. So we're covered in that sort of backdated sense, but we have to do the deal. There'll be one or two that have to go every three or four windows, and that's how we will have to operate. And it's hard because you've got to keep doing the brilliant recruitment to get you there in the first place, and hopefully that's what signing these sorts of Brazilian lads can get us to. But the reason why it's important now is because if the interest is there in Gibbs-White, you've got to sell at the right moment. It may be the case that next summer we don't have a right moment. I mean, hopefully we will in another footballer, whether it's Murillo or something. But the circumstances for selling a footballer for 70, 80, whatever £1 million, they don't align very often. You need football clubs who've got that money. By the way, that's a very, very small number in world football. And you need football clubs who've got the money and need a player in that position, etc. These are sort of one-off situations, really, and it's not easy to keep doing that at the very high end. Obviously, we've done it before with players of slightly lower values, but doing it for tens and tens of millions of pounds, you've got to have the interest and you've got to have clubs who can pay it. And we're at a table now where there's only a handful that can actually do it, aside from the clubs in Saudi. So if the interest is there, Gibbs-White with 2 years left, I don't think there's anything you can do about it, to be honest. It's the right deal for the moment.
Yeah, I know David says in the chat we don't understand the owner. We absolutely understand the owner. We also understand this financial realities of PSR, that you can't sell a Mangala and a Niakate every summer. Maybe you can, maybe you get lucky, but we were very fortunate there. Temps has got to go. Any final thoughts, Temps, before you go?
No, Jesse Lingard's trying to rewrite history with his soundbite, so don't read too much into that. It wasn't the right fit. It didn't work out well, and he's trying to unpick it. But thanks for the chat, boys, and I'll see you soon.
Yes, we shall see you soon. We might reference Jesse Lingard. Pick up on that shortly. Temps has got a meeting. There was a comment as well about Nico Dominguez from Robin Hood. We haven't discussed a long-term injury. I don't know if it's a long-term injury or not yet. It looks like it might be. There's a photo on Instagram which looked like he'd potentially had surgery, but we'll discuss that when we know more. And it would be hugely disappointing if he's out for a long time. But we haven't done anything on that yet, because I haven't seen anything official. But obviously we'll talk about that, because it'd be a huge blow to us and the player if he's out for a while. But it's probably one for another day, and there's lots of other stuff to discuss, definitely. Right. I'm not going to debate our transfer policy forever with David. He's got his opinion on where I think we got quite lucky last summer selling the Niakate and Mangala, and I hope we can do that again, but I just don't think we can every summer. I think we have to make a move at some point. Have a good day, David. Lovely stuff. All the best to you. Pete, shall we move on? Anything else on that?
No, I don't think anything else on that. I mean, there is the looming spectre of the John Textor relationship, I guess, in all of these deals and such like. The one thing that makes me feel good about it is that John Textor seems to lose out in all of his business deals. So fingers crossed.
He does, doesn't he?
Fingers crossed that's where we're at, and it continues to be the case.
Yeah, hopefully. If Leon want to buy any of our fringe players again for 30 million quid, they'd be very welcome to. On that note, a couple of players who are linked with moves. Sosa, Ramon Sosa, very strongly linked with Palmeiras. Lots of Brazilian media saying about that, but it sounds like he's not sure he wants to go, and he wants to keep going, pursuing his European dream. So that one, it might happen, it might not. And Jota Silva, I see tentatively linked with Saudi Arabia, and again he says he wants to stay. These lads, Pete, they've had these Premier League dreams. Giving up after one season might be a tough sell for them, but again, on the flip side of that, they might struggle for football next year if we do strengthen our squad significantly. So I suppose are they going to go, do you think?
It's so hard to comment on just what is essentially just loads and loads of speculation, isn't it? I think you'd be surprised to see either of them have a particularly significant impact on Forest's season next time round. Obviously, I wouldn't rule it out, and I hope that they could do. But given what we've seen so far, it doesn't seem likely. But you can't remotely criticise the guys for having made the leap that they've done, the jump that they've done, and wanting to stick it out and try and better themselves consistently, I guess. So I suppose that shows, good character traits, if anything. I mean, I think from a Forest point of view, we probably could do with them moving on to free up those positions, because I do think it'll be hugely important for us to have options coming off the bench in those wide and attacking areas that can actually make a real impact for us. And maybe with more time they can do, but clearly for neither of them, age is massively on their side, and it does feel a little bit like they're unlikely to be given a huge amount of faith and trust from Nuno. So hopefully, the best deal for everyone can be worked out. But the good thing is, these aren't players that have cost the earth. They're not going to be players who are costing enormous wages and all that sort of thing. And I think that they will still have enough profile and enough form behind them in previous clubs and such like, and have both had a little bit of time and impact and such like in the Premier League to point to, that hopefully they'll be able to get moves if that's the right way. I mean, I just want to add about Dominguez. I've got nothing. I'm not going to comment on speculation around injuries. We've heard nothing more than whispers, really. But he has been such a positive influence for Forest in the last. Well, I mean, particularly I think in the last sort of 6 months or so, where he's really found that spot. It's sort of fascinating change, I think, that we haven't talked about an awful lot. I know you've touched upon it, but how he went from being a player that a few of us really admired, but never really managed to get a spot, and was always that first one to leave the team, first one to fill in somewhere where there wasn't an option elsewhere. He really did transform into a player who it looked like we sort of needed him in the side much more often than not, didn't it? His energy and the pressing and the way he links up with players around him really seems settled and can have a real big impact for us. I mean, it felt not long ago to me that he was destined to be one of the ones that we would move on to find 15, 20, 25 million pounds, whatever, of PSR room to do other deals. But the end of the season, the second half of the season, you would desperately want to hang on to him, wouldn't you? So, all the best to him, whatever that injury is, and I'm fingers crossed he's being well looked after and we can see him back in the side, because he just feels like a big part of things to me.
Yeah, massively. I see Robin Hood in the chat again saying the Argentine national team said it's torn MCL. If you've got a link for that, email it to me, because I haven't seen it anywhere. I just Googled it. Matt Davies at forest-focus.co.uk. That'd be lovely. And then obviously we would pick up on that, and we'll do much more talk on Dominguez if he is out for a while, but again, not seen anything official on that front. Just the Lingard thing, and I don't know if I won't even ask Pete to comment on it if he wants to, but Temps was referencing some comments on him there where he said he didn't really want to join Forest and says he basically didn't have a choice. Speaking to, I think, the BBC, he said the Forest deal, when we were going through that, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but I wasn't in control of anything at that time. I basically didn't have a choice. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what offer was on the table from West Ham and what was on offer from Forest. There was a place I'd have preferred to go, but people have their own say. And at that time, I didn't feel I could voice my opinion. Now I can see people didn't have my best interests at heart. Obviously, West Ham didn't happen. I went to Forest. So it sounds like he really didn't want to sign for us, which I don't know if that's rewriting history. I hope he had a say in his own situation and wasn't being coerced to sign for us, or whether that's some rewriting of history. But I thought I'd mention it. I don't know if you probably don't even want to say anything on that, Pete, do you? But you feel free to.
Honestly, I haven't looked into it any more than literally those comments that you sent to me. It just feels like a little bit irrelevant to me personally. Whether that's true for him or true for the whole situation, whatever. I mean, he's obviously a guy who's had a difficult time of it, really, with the way that his career has sort of panned out and some difficulties off the pitch and such like. So. I'm not going to get remotely stuck into him. If it is the case that he wanted to go to West Ham and he was sort of convinced to come to Forest, then I think that's fair enough. I mean, if he wanted to go to West Ham, given that he'd already been there and had a good spell of it, I wouldn't take that as an insult on Forest whatsoever. It would just seem to make perfect sense to me. I've got no idea what's going on, what any of it means, what the truth is, but I don't think it really matters to us right now, to be honest.
No, I'm in the same boat. I thought I'd read them out because it's very unusual comments from a player after they'd signed for us. So, yeah, I thought I'd read that out. I don't think there's too much to say about it. I think that covers basically everything on the agenda. We've got through quite a lot there in an hour, certainly. Pete, any final thoughts? Anything you want to add before we go?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's a very different podcasting environment when the season ends, isn't it? And I don't have to apologise to listeners or viewers or whatever, because I don't really know how to navigate the endless speculation and sort of having opinions on stuff that you're not remotely qualified to do. But hopefully we've done an okay job of having a look at all of it, and we'll continue to do that for a few weeks, I guess. But I'm looking forward to being able to talk about actual football and things where, it's a bit more concrete.
I think we have. I mean, I think this is pretty concrete. David Ornstein tweeted about it. Forest are close to signing all three. So, it's difficult to comment on players. I think I have made the mistake, certainly, of commenting too much on players and getting too hyped about them on this podcast without seeing more than YouTube highlights and reading about them. Sangare is a big example of that, of someone who I thought was going to, solve everything. And then there's all kinds of context around players and everything that you have to take into account. So we'll try and certainly do that. But the general principle, I think, is, it's pretty interesting. It's pretty exciting. And we quite like this Brazilian market. And the recruitment team have earned some trust as well, haven't they, the last year or two?
Oh, they definitely have. I mean, when you take the Brazilian market, I was speaking to some chaps about this the other day, the work that we've done there. I guess if you take the four signings of Murillo, Danilo, Miguel and Scarpa, I think you'd have to say that that's an overwhelming success, because the two that have come here and not had a great time of it for whatever reasons haven't really cost us anything. I think if anything, we've actually come out with profit on Scarpa, and who knows what will happen with Miguel, but certainly it's not going to be a massive problem for the club financially. And the other two are hits. I mean, Danilo's had a difficult time of it, particularly with injury in the last season, and I think settling has been sort of a bit hit and miss and finding his perfect role and that sort of thing. But he has shone at times, and I think anyone who's being sort of fair and reasonable would say that there's definitely a footballer in there who could have a big impact for us. Whether or not that will happen or not, who knows? Because you can't be sure about these things. But it's definitely potential and hasn't cost us an awful lot of money. And I mean, Murillo is about as big a transfer success as you will ever see. So I'd say that they've probably earned a fair bit of trust with those deals. You're not going to win them all. That's just how recruitment is. It's too hard. I think it's far too complicated, far too hard to get it right. There are risks that you can't even mitigate for. You don't know how someone's going to adapt to a different country. You can do as much work as you want to, but there's so much at play there. Personal circumstances for footballers, as humans too. It's an incredibly hard game. But if you're making a big success and a decent success, 2 out of 4, I'd say you're in a pretty good spot, and especially when the other two don't actually cost you an awful lot. So yeah, they've earned trust. I mean, on the podcasting in general, I mean, this is probably a little bit of the inside baseball sort of thing, but it's quite hard to get the balance right when it comes to transfers, because you sort of do need to have an opinion and say something on a podcast, otherwise it's not going to be very interesting. But when you look at these 3 Brazilian potential signings, who would be surprised if at the end this time next year we're talking about 3 players who just didn't feel like they really made the cut, and we're looking about moving them on, just like we might be with Jota and Sosa. But also, who would be surprised if those are 1, 2 or 3 of them have had a massive impact and improved us? Like I just wouldn't be surprised with any of those outcomes or anything in between. And that's that's the game, I guess. So we can try and have opinions about it, but who really knows? It's so complicated. But I think cautiously optimistic is probably the right line to tread right now.
Yeah, I think with transfers in general, and I often refer back to Ian Graham's book that I read over the summer about how to win the Premier League. He said 50% of transfers work, 50% don't. And there's all sorts of reasons. But as Pete says, 2 out of every 4, if one's a mega smash like Murillo and one's decent and 2 don't quite work, that's probably not a bad hit rate, especially when it comes to the fees. If we're not spending huge amounts of money relatively on these players, then it takes a bit of the pressure off, and we can roll the dice a bit more, and sometimes you'll get what you want, sometimes you won't. If we go out and spend, which we're not going to, I'm sure now, 60 million quid on a player, then it's a different kettle of fish altogether. But yeah, I think all those principles I massively agree with. Right,
and I was just going to add, interestingly, on the Ian Graham thing, I guess fans may not like it, and you probably won't, as someone who needs to get some people watching your podcast, but I think the Ian Graham message is do less transfers, isn't it, really? I think it is. Try to build what you've got from within, and transfers aren't the answer most of the time.
I'm trying to get him on actually
that'd be great.
through Nick Marshall. Yeah, I don't know if it'll happen because I don't know if he does a lot of media or not. But Ian was the person who he was like data analyst for Liverpool under Klopp when they won the league. So just some interesting insights onto transfers and how they work and stuff like that. I can give you the rest of the schedule for the week. Actually, I think everyone who, if you're interested, like I say, tomorrow Nathan Joyce from the Copper Club with some actual insight on these three players. So that'll be good. Wednesday with Fletch, get his thoughts on the season and the summer ahead. Thursday is either something on Dale Taylor, because he had a really good season with Wigan, and we do have a quota in the Conference League of homegrown players, and he could fit that bill. An exciting young homegrown player that we've sort of forgotten, who's had quite a few loans. So I'm going to speak to a Wigan podcast and see what they make of him after such a good season. And then that's either Thursday or Friday. I'm going to speak to the Olympiacos podcast, and I don't know if I'm saying this right. Thrylos 7 International, nice guys. Get some thoughts on the relationship between the two clubs, and probably some transfer chat as well, and a bit on the Conference League and what it's like to play in it and win it. So that'll be good. And we'll probably even do a fan phone in as well tomorrow night or Wednesday night with Mark. So that's the plan. Loads coming up. And as ever, if you've enjoyed this, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe, do consider membership or Patreon. If you're a member or sign up Patreon, you'll get early access to almost all that stuff. So it's well worth a couple of quid a month, either £3 or £5, I think. So yeah, check that out, or just hit, give us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. One last thing from me, if you're familiar with the Forest podcast scene, then you might have seen Adam from Red Side of the Trent post sadly that his wife has been diagnosed with a brain tumour, and he's doing some fundraising. So I'll put the link in the description, and if you want to donate, I'm sure he'd very much appreciate that and appreciate all your well wishes, which we send obviously to him and all those guys and his family. Right, Pete Blackburn, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
I did enjoy it. Lots, got through lots there in just over an hour. So appreciate everyone's company today. Do us a favour and hit like, by the way, if you haven't already. YouTube idiot comment, but it does help. And do subscribe. That helps even more, I think, apparently. So yeah, busy week ahead. Do join us for that if you can. But if you can't, we shall see you soon.